First of all, on this issue of double standards, which is the one that irks or irritates Mouin, you said that you are not a person of double standards, unlike people like Mouin. You hold high a single standard, and you condemn deliberate Israeli attacks on
civilians.
When they occurred, yeah.
And I would say that's true for the period up till 1967, and I think it's accurate, your account of the First Intifada. There, it seems to me, you are in conformity with most mainstream accounts. And the case of the First Intifada, you also used, surprisingly, you used Arab human rights sources like Al-Haq, which I think Mouin worked for during the First Intifada. That's true. But then something very strange happens. So let's illustrate it.
Wait, there's something strange which happened is the Arabs rejected peace offers. That's what happened.
By accepting the Oslo agreements.
Yeah.
Not the
by rejecting, he's talking about Camp David and Camp
David. If we have time, I know the record very well. I'd be very happy to go through it with you. But let's get to those double standards. So, this is what you have to say about Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982. You said Israel was reluctant to harm civilians, sought to avoid casualties on both sides, and took care not to harm Lebanese and Palestinian civilians. You then went on to acknowledge the massive use of IDF firepower against civilians during the siege of Beirut, which traumatized Israeli society. Morris quickly enters the caveat that Israel, quote, tried to pinpoint military targets, but inevitably many civilians were hit. That's your description of the Lebanon War. As I say, that's when I first got involved in the conflict. I am a voracious reader. I read everything on the Lebanon War. I would say there's not a single account of the Lebanon War in which the estimates are between 15 and 20,000 Palestinian and Lebanese were killed, overwhelmingly civilians, the biggest bloodletting until the current Gaza genocide. Biggest bloodletting, I would say, I can't think of a single mainstream account that remotely approximates what you just said. So, leaving aside, I can name the books, voluminous, huge volumes. I'll just take one example. Now, you will remember, because I think you served in Lebanon in 82, am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you will remember that Dov Yarmia kept a war diary. So, with your permission, allow me to describe what he wrote during his diary. So, he writes, the war machine of the IDF is galloping and trampling over the conquered territory, demonstrating a total insensitivity to the fate of the Arabs who are found in its path. A PLO-run hospital suffered a direct hit. Thousands of refugees are returning to the city. When they arrive at their homes, many of which have been destroyed or damaged, you hear their cries of pain and their howls over the deaths of their loved ones. The air is permeated with the smell of corpses. Destruction and death are continuing.
What you're making,
does that sound like your description of the Lebanon War?
Forget my descriptions.
Forget it?
The point you're making...
Words are in print. We can't just forget them.
Let me just finish my sentence. The point you're making, which you somehow forget, is that there are Israelis who strongly criticize their own side and describe how Israelis are doing things which they regard as immoral. You don't find that on the Arab side.
I'm talking about
don't
you.
Find that.
Mr. Morris,
Don't
I'm not
forget
talking
me.
about Dev
Don't
Yarmiel.
Yarmiel is the
I'm
left
talking
wing.
about you, the historian. How did you depict the Lebanon
Because
war?
I believe
Yeah.
that the Israeli military tried to avoid committing a civilian
So
casualty.
Dev,
as I think they've
as
tried,
well?
Dev
as I think they've tried
all
to do in
all
Gaza
the accounts
now.
by Robert Fisk and Pity the
Robert
Nation.
Fisk is
yeah,
an
I know.
anti-Zionist
I know.
journalist.
I know.
Has always been.
Right. So
always been.
that's why you can say with such confidence that you don't condemn deliberate Israeli attacks on
There weren't
civilians.
any.
I do.
Because there weren't any.
No, I didn't say there weren't any.
Yeah, you
And
didn't?
You agreed that I have condemned Israeli attacks
Yes, there are
on civilians.
I never quarrel with facts. Your description of the 1982 war is so shocking, it makes my innards writhe. And then your description of the Second Intifada, your description of defensive shield,
When the Arabs were bombing, when Arab suicide bombers were destroying Jews in masses in buses and in restaurants. That's the Second Intifada. Do you remember that?
You can try
suicide bombers in Jerusalem's buses and restaurants.
I am completely aware of that. But if you forgot the numbers,
I don't forget.
It was 3-1.
They killed mostly armed Palestinian gunmen.
That's what you say in your book.
But
that's not what Amnesty International said. That's not what Human Rights Watch said.
I don't remember what they said.
I do.
No,
that's not what
I don't know whether
said.
their figures are right. My figures are right.
Listen.
In the Second Intifada, some 4,000 Palestinians were killed. Most of them armed people, and the Israelis, 1,000 Israelis were killed. Almost all of them civilians.
Professor Morris, fantasy, but I'm not going to argue with here. Here's a simple challenge. You said not to look at the camera. Scares the people. I'll make the open challenge.
You are going to scare them.
No. Professor Morris.
Open challenge.
Words are in print. I wrote 50 pages analyzing all of your work. I quote, some will say cherry pick, but I think accurately quote you. Here's a simple challenge. Answer me in print. Answer what I wrote and show where I'm making things up. Answer me in print.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not familiar with
that's no problem. You're a busy man. You're an important historian. You don't have to know everything that's in print, especially by modest publishers. But now you know. And so here's the public challenge. You answer and show where I cherry-picked, where I misrepresented.
Send me the article.
And then we can have a civil, scholarly discussion.
I'm not sure we will agree, even if
we don't have to agree. It's for the reader to decide, looking at both sides, where this truth stands.